And thanks for this opportunity to speak about Australia's engagement with Asia from the perspective of trade, and in particular to say a few words about what Austrade is doing in this space. I'm particularly pleased to be addressing trade and investment, not just, of course, because these two things are inextricably linked, but also, of course, because Austrade reports to Australia's first ever Minister for Trade and Investment. Asia's importance to Australia's economy is growing by the day. It is one of the most important factors to consider when assessing the international conditions for our national prosperity. Asian demand for our exports has helped Australia manage the global financial crisis better than most other developed economies, in fact, probably better than all other developed economies. And investment from Asia has added to the productive capacity of the economy and to overall productivity. In 2013, 7 of our top 10 export markets were in Asia and represented 65% of our total exports. Asian markets and Australia's geographic proximity are critical, not just for our trade ties and our capacity to access important global supply chains, but also to the level of foreign investment in Australia. FDI has grown markedly in Australia over the past decade. In fact, it has more than doubled from about $292 billion to $630 billion in 2013. This increase reflects the quality and performance of the Australian economy and our people, but also that we are close to the centres of global growth in Asia and that our economy is integrating more with the production processes of the region. In recent years, there's been a marked increase in FDI from Asia, with Chinese FDI reaching nearly $21 billion last year. It's now overtaken Switzerland and Canada to become the 6th largest foreign investor in this country. Other Asian nations to join China as fast-growing sources of FDI would include Singapore, with $25 billion invested, as well as Malaysia, with nearly $8 billion invested. It's not only the sheer reality of economic growth in Asia which makes the region important to us, it's also the direction of that growth and its expected nature. The rise of an Asian consumer middle class is of special importance here because of the nature of the goods and services we expect that a wealthier middle class will demand. Australia is already good at supplying many of them, but faced increased competition in most of them. The projection that Asia's middle class of 600 million people will over the next 20 to 30 years grow to about 2 billion will have important implications for Australia's economic development. A rising middle class will in all likelihood demand more in the way of education, tourism and different types of food such as higher protein diets. It will also place stronger demands on energy supply and water, two key security issues for 21st century consumers and nations. And Australia is in a good position to provide products and services that help address these issues. The ripple effects on our economy could be profound. In the first place, it will mean a priority to modernise Australia's infrastructure to make sure it can cope with the increased number of students and tourists and freight traffic. Secondly, it raises the need to have examined all feasible options to expand our national capacity to grow food, such as in Northern Australia, and the government's white paper will assess this option. The emergence of these commercial opportunities come as our exporters and investors are gaining a greater degree of market access to build on our existing multilateral, plurilateral and bilateral trade agreements in Asia. Let me now turn to that trade negotiation agenda. The agreements being negotiated and that have been negotiated focus on our major trade and investment partners and reflect our interests in maintaining our close economic partnerships, protecting our advantage in key markets, and building trade and growth in our region, which has flow-on benefits for Australia. As you know, the Minister for Trade and Investment, Andrew Robb, recently concluded FTAs with South Korea and with Japan. The government is also close to concluding a similar agreement with China, all after many years of negotiation. China, of course, is our largest trading partner, while Japan and Korea are our second and third largest export markets, respectively. The significance of these agreements becomes clearer, though, in light of the fact that together they take just over half of Australia's exports. And of course, China is now by far our largest single trading partner for goods and services. It's the largest single source for goods and services trade we've had since the 1940s, where the UK dominated as a trading partner, on the back, of course, of the strong wool trade and the undertaking to sell the entire clip to the UK. So we have to reach well back into the last century to find a single economy which is so significant in our total trade and our total trade, our exports and our imports. And that situation only seems likely to increase. When you factor in the substantial portion of our trade now occurring with other markets where we have existing FTAs, including Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, and of course the United States, a significant pattern begins to emerge. For the first time in our modern history, the majority of Australia's exports will be destined for markets which are not only for the most part high growth, but where trade barriers have been reduced or eliminated. Australia already has 7 free trade agreements in force with Malaysia, Singapore, Chile, Thailand, the United States, New Zealand, and the ASEAN countries. The countries covered by these FTAs account for more than a quarter of our total trade, which makes Australia a solid export hub, allowing investors to expand their trade and access new markets. As I said, we've completed FTA negotiations with Korea and Japan, and we're engaged in other bilateral negotiations, in particular with China, Indonesia and India, and in a number of other plurilateral negotiations. Importantly, these FTAs also strengthen the opportunity and conditions for two-way investment. The Japan-Australia Economic Partnership presents huge opportunities for Australian agricultural goods, for example, but also for our services industries like finance and a whole range of other industries. The Korea-Australia FTA provides similar advantages, eliminating very high tariffs on beef, wheat, sugar, dairy, wine, horticulture and seafood, among others. Crucially, it also places our exports on a level playing field with those of our competitors with similar concessions. And both these agreements will provide significant impetus to foreign direct investment, and I think we can expect similar outcomes from negotiations with China. Elsewhere, the government has joined with others in concluding a multilateral trade facilitation agreement as part of the WTO, a very significant accord, which is estimated to increase world GDP by $1 trillion a year and create 21 million new jobs. In addition, we're involved in an extension of the Information Technology Agreement, a new Trade in Services Agreement negotiation, and possibly also a Trade in Environmental Goods Agreement. And we're making progress in the negotiations towards the 12-nation Trans-Pacific Partnership, creating a more seamless and far less protected trade and investment environment between countries which comprise 40% of world GDP. And then there is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, taking in ASEAN, the 3 big North Asian economies, plus Australia, New Zealand and India. All these agreements will have important implications for regional growth and integration, as well as the ongoing expansion of Asia's middle class, not to mention Australia's trade and investment. It's difficult for me to recall a time where we've had a busier trade negotiation agenda, and over the last 6 months, 3 significant achievements as part of that. The onus is now on business to grasp the opportunities to supply an increasingly discerning regional and global marketplace. Austrade's extensive overseas network, including 40 offices or points of presence in Asia alone, is a great asset to utilise in this task, and there are other ways we can help as well. One of them is through the greater role we see emerging for business missions, something Austrade is devoting significant extra attention and resources to. And already this afternoon I've had a couple of participants in the recent events come and say how much they derived from those events. Our new online delegations register allows businesses to express interest in accompanying ministerial delegations ahead of time and is already helping us recruit for missions more effectively. Earlier this year, we took the lead role in organising Australia Week in China, a highly successful series of events, more than 110 meetings across 4 cities over 5 days, promoting Australian trade, tourism, education and investment, and including a business delegation of more than 700 people. This occurred alongside and as part of the Prime Minister's CEO delegation to North Asia. The recent budget set aside funding for a similar event in 2016, and AWIC provides a model for a renewed focus on business missions around the world, creating more opportunities for business people to accompany ministers overseas. That includes the Prime Minister and the Trade and Investment Minister, but also other relevant portfolio areas such as agriculture, industry and resources. And in addition, of course, the Foreign Minister has emphasised economic diplomacy in the work of the Foreign Affairs and Trade portfolio. Our experience has shown that such missions are particularly useful in North Asia, where they help open doors and lead to tangible commercial outcomes that might not have been possible otherwise. The Australia Week in China, for example, resulted in the signing of 20 commercial agreements valued at around $894 million and several inward investment deals worth around $60 million. And there's some very substantial investments in the pipeline, which we hope will come to public notice before too long. However, they are also useful elsewhere in supporting the government's economic diplomacy agenda and amplifying the message that Australia is well and truly open for business. The Prime Minister and Trade and Investment Minister's recent tour of Canada and the United States is an example of this, sending a very clear signal that Australia is committed to expanding opportunities for trade and investment and supporting private sector-led growth. Austrade also has an important role to play in promoting and attracting inward foreign direct investment, as well as facilitation and aftercare. We do this through our global network of investment commissioners, the investment team in Australia, and in close collaboration with the states and territories, as well as industry groups and other government agencies. The 5 national investment priorities that the federal government has agreed on with the states and territories earlier this year sets the parameters for our work. They allow us to focus our resources in an effective way, which in turn makes it easier to decide on which markets to concentrate our assistance. These priorities are food and agribusiness, resources and energy, economic infrastructure, tourism infrastructure, and education and advanced services, manufacturing and technologies. A good example of how we work in this area is the case of Biomax Technology, a Singapore firm that specialises in waste management technology, which has established a subsidiary in Melbourne. Austrade helped the firm establish the subsidiary by providing tailored information and introductions to Invest Victoria. Austrade also played a role in helping China's Full Share Group invest $40 million in a Port Douglas resort, as well as a $200 million commitment to refurbish the resort. We've been working with the firm for several years and provided introductions to the Queensland Government. And these are just 2 of the examples of the sorts of role that Austrade can play in facilitating particular investments. They and others will be subject of the Minister's first report to Parliament on investment. At the same time, we are assisting in our investment promotion by the private sector through the 20-member Trade and Investment Policy Advisory Council and by a team of 5 investment specialists from the private sector who are in the process of recruiting to Austrade. And I expect the Minister will be able to make some announcements on that regard shortly. As a result, Austrade can engage more effectively with private sector trends and benefit from the experience of high-level executives from a range of industries. One of our major preoccupations at the moment, of course, is a major forum, an investment forum, that we're organising to be part of the B20 meeting here in Australia, in Sydney, in a few weeks' time, which will bring to Australia what we hope will be an impressive collection of high-level CEOs representing substantial existing and potential investment in this economy. And that, I think, provides me with a nice segue into Mike Callaghan, who will talk to you, I believe, about the G20. Thank you for your attention.